Mm.
Hey, Jason, good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
What's going on? Oh, hey, and
By
that
the way, who even won the Super Bowl? I have no idea.
It was a real
Seahawks.
tight game. You missed a slugfest. It was just back and forth the whole time, like boom, 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 boom. No, I'm kidding. It was a blowout, but it was a ugly, like just a non game. But the Seahawks ended up winning. Like what was the score? I don't know the score. That's how interested I was. But it was
It
a
was
good
hard to watch.
time. It was a good time. Jason had some folks at his house after services. We all went over there and got to enjoy some good time with each other. So the game was on kind of in the background.
Sure, everybody stopped for the halftime show, right?
Well, we did an alternate show. We watched Dude Perfect.
Hmm.
That's right. Well, hey guys, it's about a minute past. We had Jesse on and we lost him. I guess he'll try to get back on. But I'm looking on here and appreciate. I'm looking on here and seeing Proverbs chapter 10, and appreciate Rick going through and the last 2 weeks really taking the lead. And yeah, that said, we are this portion, and we've had easy street up to this point because all we have to do is just kind of deal with a section, and kind of a section will deal with maybe a theme or something like that. Uh, in those first 9 chapters. But even Rick was saying, as he was communicating to Brad and me about how far uh, the reading went last week, it is a little bit more difficult to nail down how you're going to read in chunks and how you're going to deal with sections in this chapter and moving forward, I guess, through most of the remainder of the book. So with that said, you've got all these short sayings, really, um, and it seems like there's a topic here, and then the next verse is another topic, and so a couple suggestions have been made. I'm gonna go with one that Brad had suggested, and that is that we will continue to have continuity in our reading. We'll continue to go through, verse by verse through the book, but instead of maybe jumping from one subject here or there, maybe what we could do is try to see, all right, in this section, are there some themes that are developing with, maybe some repeated subjects? Like, is this subject dealt with multiple times in the chapter or in this section? Or are there any contrasts between one subject to another? Like, are there patterns developing? I think sometimes when you do that, you do see that maybe there is a pattern, maybe there are contrasts, and maybe that'll help sharpen our focus on what the book is saying, instead of it being like just some scattershot deal, some scattershot approach. So, um, did I remember correctly, Rick, that last week the reading made it through about verse 15, or was about to pick up in verse 15?
Yeah, that's
All
correct.
right. All right. Well, how about this? Why don't, since we're at 15, I'm looking here in my Bible and I just see I see that my publishers have broken it up in such a way to where we could start in verse 14, if that's all right. But we'll deal with sections in our reading. So we'll deal with 14 through 17, 18 through 21, um, or 22, I'm sorry, 18 through 22, and then 23 through 26, 27 through 29, and then 30 through 32. And if you need some help on that, I can repeat that. But as far as readers go, that would give us 5 sections. We could go with 5 readers for now. Why don't we
Ian,
go and, huh?
I'm sorry. Chris had contacted me and he was trying to get the information to log in, and I just completely missed everything you said on the dividing up. I just want to make sure my name wasn't in there.
I hadn't called names yet. I just was
Okay.
doing 5 sections for now. And I was about to go in the order for reading, which that works because now that you're in, you'll be able to hear. Lisa, I see you're unmuted. Are you able to read? Are you willing to read?
Yes, I can read.
All right. Well, I'm gonna start calling names now. So Brad, lock in with me. All right, Lisa, if you'll take verses 14 through 17. Leland, if you'll take verses 18 through 22. Jason, if you will take 23 through 26. Keith, if you will take 27 through 32. I said we had 5. Those are 4 sections. Let's deal with that, and then we'll see what we can do afterward by way of discussion. But that gives us 4 readers from now, 4 sections. If y'all got that, let's go ahead and read the rest of Proverbs 10, and we'll open the discussion up after our reading. Lisa, take us away.
Wise people store up knowledge, but the mouth of the foolish is near destruction. The rich man's wealth is his strong city. The destruction of the poor is their poverty. The labor of the righteous leads to life, the wages of the wicked to sin. He who keeps instruction is in the way of life, but he who refuses correction goes astray.
Whoever hides hatred has lying lips, and whoever spreads slander is a fool. In the multitude of words, sin is not lacking, but he who restrains his lips is wise. The tongue of the righteous is choice silver. The heart of the wicked is worth little. The lips of the righteous feed many, but fools die for lack of wisdom. The blessing of the Lord makes one rich, and he adds no sorrow with it.
Doing wrong is like a joke to a fool, but wisdom is pleasure to a man of understanding. What the wicked dreads will come upon him, but the desire of the righteous will be granted. When the tempest passes, the wicked is no more. The righteous is established forever. Like vinegar to the teeth and smoke to the eyes, so is the sluggard to those who send him.
Fear of the Lord prolongs days, but the years of the wicked will be shortened. The hope of the righteous will be gladness, but the expectation of the wicked will perish. The way of the Lord is strength for the upright, but destruction will come to the workers of iniquity. The righteous will never be removed, but the wicked will not inhabit the earth. The mouth of the righteous brings forth wisdom, but the perverse tongue will be cut out. The lips of the righteous know what is acceptable, but the mouth of the wicked what is perverse.
All right. So if I was going to say, okay, I'm going to do some topical sermons or topical Bible studies, and I want to go through the wisdom literature, just maybe even the book of Proverbs alone, but I want to deal with this subject. I could do this. I could take out a notepad, or I could type it out. And I could say, okay, if I'm going to talk about lying or sins of the tongue or something like that, any type of thing like that, I could go through the whole book of Proverbs and I'd see it is filled, chock full of that. And then I could build a theme, right, with all the passages in the book of Proverbs that deal with the sins of the tongue. And I could do that with all kinds of different things. And I think in my mind, I know when I come to the book of Proverbs and I see a section like what we're dealing with in chapter 10, it oftentimes seems scattershot. It's like, oh, I'm dealing with the sins of the tongue. Now I'm dealing with, immorality, fornication. Oh, now I'm dealing with this. And so it's kind of seems like it's all over the place. But if we're looking at these sections, just starting off, section 14 through 17, as you're reading that, Lisa was reading that, is there any type of pattern that kind of seems to develop in maybe the way it was written, and or the subjects dealt with? Is there anything that stands out to you in how that was approached, how the subject matter is approached in verses 14 through 17? Any patterns jump out at you? I'll give you an example. I'll start us off because I know how it is when you're preaching. Sometimes you're looking for an answer and there's like 5 different correct answers. But there's one that I'm looking for, right? So here's what I noticed that just as Lisa was reading, like verses 14 through 17 have different subjects, but there's a contrast between what is, good versus that which is bad. And so you got different subjects that are dealt with. Like people who store up knowledge versus the foolish. You got the rich versus the poor. You got the the righteous versus the one who's a sinner. Instruction versus one who hates correction. It's a pattern, though. It's like, here's the good versus here's the bad. And so when we think about trying to deal with any subject of the Bible, we want to come at it from every angle possible. What does the Bible say about any given subject? Well, here's the positive side of things. Maybe here's the other side of things. Maybe that's helpful to look at it from that standpoint. It seems like the Proverbs here in various sections will do that. There's a compare and contrast. I saw you had your hand up there, Brad.
One of the things that, as you're talking about that and you see these contrasts being made, before you even get into the specific subject matter and the individuals who are being contrasted, I think this stands out to me in comparison with the way a lot of people speak today. We like to think in terms of gray, well, maybe there's no real right and wrong. Maybe situation has to determine a lot of that. But as this section, and really as we keep going, clearly points out, is, as you said, there is a right, there is a wrong, and the distinctions are pretty clear.
Good point. Good point there. Absolutely. We live in an age where, with the postmodern age, there's just a lot of my truth versus your truth type of thinking in the world, and that can influence us within the church. Not even just so much as, all right, we think those are those bad guys, those wolves over there that are very apparently doing things wrong, but very subtly among well-intentioned people, if we're not mindful of that point that you made there, Brad, we could end up being compromisers. And book of Revelation, especially those first 3 chapters, teach us that there's no room for compromise when it comes to truth versus error, righteousness versus sin. Good point. About what is said there within those contrasts, is there anything that stands out to anybody here in our discussion? Some things that would be helpful for us to point out and meditate on while we're here, just dealing with subject matter.
I'll throw in one other thing, and I think this is seen in all that was read here. You mentioned sins of the tongue a moment ago, but he does in each section speak about the mouth and what's said, but there's also a strong emphasis on what's listened to, receiving correction, receiving wisdom and understanding. So there's also a little bit of, I don't know if you call it an exact contrast, but the difference between listening and taking in, as opposed to what we're putting out with our mouth. Both of those things, both of those actions, we need to be discerning. And that goes really across all walks. In that first section, you mentioned the contrast. He has a contrast between the wise and the fool, between the rich and the poor, between the righteous and the wicked. But however you label those who are involved in the good or the evil, they all still need to be mindful of, or they all can be identified in part by what they're saying and what they're listening to.
Yes, good points. That's one of the things that stood out to me is, refusing correction versus accepting correction. The one who keeps instruction. Very good point. Lisa, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, one thing that I noticed in this section is things that lead to destruction and then things that lead to life. And, I want to put my focus on the things that lead to life.
Very good. Yeah, as you point that out, I'm looking there. That's there. Yeah. Verse 16, labor of the righteous leads to life. Verse 17, he who keeps instruction is in the way of life. That's good. Good observations. And so Brad, I mentioned sins of the tongue, and then toward the end of what he said, he was talking about he kind of started veering in that direction. Also, that seems to be a big part of what's in the next section, verses 18 through 22. What do you think? Are there any lessons there? How are we doing in taming the tongue? How are you guys doing in that in your daily walk? Anybody share to confess your sins to one another that you may be healed?
Always room for growth.
It's hard.
It is hard. It is hard. And I think that's a big part of what James says in James chapter 3. That it is difficult. And that said, we don't just throw up our hands and say, well, it's, the tongue is untamable. I guess that's the one thing we can't tame. There's context to what's being said in James 3, and it talks about the responsibility that comes along with being a teacher. And therefore, you have to really be careful about the tongue and how it gets used. And about verse 18, whoever hides hatred has lying lips, and whoever spreads slander is a fool. How about verse 19? Is it easy to open up your mouth versus knowing when to keep your mouth shut, to stay silent? I'm still working on that. But there's wisdom in going back to the word, because I say I'm still working on that, right? We're all working on that. But when you go back to the word and you read it, and we're in a group study like this or group discussion, it kind of it helps you to think about what to be praying about, what to be working on, and what to be exercising daily. So coming back to the word like this is very helpful to continue to work on that. Keith, I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the mouth and the words are simply an outlet for the heart. So if your heart is in the right condition, then that's going to be reflected in your speech and what you say. It kind of goes back to the salt water versus bitter water. You can't have both. You can have one or the other.
Very good. Very good observation. That's right. So if we want to tame our tongue, maybe we can tame our heart. Right? Good thoughts there.
One of the things that you see in these contrast statements is that sometimes those topics that we like to pull out are combined. They're not treated as separate topics. Just as Keith pointed out, verse 20, the tongue of the righteous is choice silver, the heart of the wicked is worth little. So in comparing the righteous and the wicked, one, he speaks of the tongue, the other the heart, but they're not unconnected. They're exactly connected, as Keith said. In the same, in verse 21, he speaks of the lips of the righteous, which would be their speech, but then the fools die for lack of wisdom. Going back to that, taking in what they're. So all of these things, though there are multiple topics, even the lazy and the diligent that will be talked about, that still goes to the preparing of the heart. The rich and the poor. There's another way to be rich, which the first part of the book of Proverbs shows us. The greatest riches are the wisdom of God. And so those who've given themselves to learn and to know we don't have to think purely in monetary terms there.
Oh, very good. Yes, all of that is connected, working your way backward and all of that. I appreciate that. I think everything you just said, you probably got from the text. That's right there. I appreciate that. And working your way backwards, the blessing of the Lord, being rich, and having a wisdom that comes from above, and then that affecting our heart, that will affect the way that we speak, and also will affect, our decision to keep our mouth shut and to have some discretion. Verses 23 through 26. Anything stand out there as far as maybe a theme there that is present? Is there anything that stands out to you? Whether it's a theme, I know I'm kind of focusing in on the theme. Hey, look for themes, look for patterns. That's to help us. But even if you don't have a theme or contrast or something like that, just jumping off the page, I don't want that to make you shy away from contributing today. If there's just anything that topic wise that you want to speak to that's there addressed in the text, by all means, contribute.
I think there in verse 23, to do evil is like sport to a fool. I mean, that is something that you definitely encounter in the world, to where, especially in the business world, that you would see individuals who they would get one over on somebody, and then, okay, that was very profitable for me, and then it became a recurring pattern to where you had to navigate around lots of these salesmen in our industry, because you knew that you could not trust the thing they would say, because all they were concerned about was winning, and whatever that may be. That's one of those that is absolutely, like, seen it firsthand.
Yeah, you bring up a good point there, Rick. As you were stating there, I think back to working in different companies and seeing that as well. And there's a such thing as healthy competition, and there's a such thing as unhealthy competition. And I think when we sharpen one another and we're striving all for the same goal, and we're trying to build one another up, that's a team effort. But Jesus warns against having a competitive spirit, one against another, and maybe think about that and how that can branch out into all walks of life. Anybody else? I thought somebody else had their hand up. Leland.
Oh, there in 23, I think also that is, to me, that really hits young people, because too many of them are too easily led astray into doing something that they think is fun, but it hurts somebody. I remember when I was young and dumb and I did stupid stuff. Prime example would be around Halloween, doing pranks on neighbors and stuff that, I look back on it now and, I should have had my butt kicked up around my ears by my dad. Of course, he didn't know that we'd done it, but still. But even then, you see so many young people today, their brains ain't working completely like they're supposed to yet. And so they end up getting led astray or down a different path than what they should go, because what they're doing is labeled as fun. Hey, let's go do this. Let's hassle this kid, or let's, tear this up or whatever. And for too many of them, that starts them down a dark path. But then others, they do it and they look back and think, oh, why did I do that? I know better than to do that. So I think that 23 has a lot to do with that as well.
I appreciate that contribution. Absolutely. To do evil like a sport. That's very foolish. And I appreciate that. And I think I saw, did we have Jason have his hand up, and did Chris, did you also have something to contribute there? I'll go
I
Jason
was just
first
gonna
since you're unmuted.
I was just gonna add the 23 there. The wisdom is pleasure to a man of understanding, um, fulfilling satisfaction or contentment that has staying power, um, is something that may not truly elicit all the senses, but there is a longevity to that satisfaction that is valuable and pleasant. And so for the wise, kind of like what Leland was saying, a prank or mischief, it peaks really quick and then it instantly drops off. Um, wisdom from above, it it preserves and protects us, and we have satisfaction from knowing I just stepped over a pitfall or um, anything in that category.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Very good. It speaks to, where your heart is. That's where your treasure's at. What is satisfying to you? Wisdom and understanding. If that's what is satisfying to you, it speaks to where your heart's at. Appreciate that. Now, Chris, I thought you had your hand up, but then I mentioned you and you said maybe not. Chris looks like he's in a John boat out on the river.
Uh, no, I apologize. No, I did not. But all of the comments that you all have made today reminds me from this chapter. I have a lot of choices to make, and I need to make the right choices. Each one of these verses and everything that you've talked about presents a choice for me to make every day of my life, and it's. I think the point is I can choose. I can choose each and every day and each and every choice to do the right thing. But it takes a lot of diligence.
Oh man, yes, there's a lot of wisdom packed in there. We have choices. It involves diligence, and as you're saying that, it makes me think about, um, like Calvinistic ideas of being one way versus another inherently, and not having a choice in the matter. I remember studying with someone through the epistles, and it was said one time, we think about like a once saved, always saved, whether or not a Christian can be eternally lost based on the decisions they make. We have our go-to passages like in Hebrews and the epistles that Peter writes, but really the whole New Testament has it in there. And so as you're making that statement, it just reminds me that here we are in Proverbs, and we do have the matter of free will. We do have the matter of choice, and we're given that by way of instruction in here. We need to be diligent. Thank you for that. Yeah, we do have diligent. We do have that versus laziness. We have wisdom versus that which is not. How about verses 27 through 32? Verses 27 through 32. Anything stand out there?
I think along with what Jason was saying earlier from the previous section, that idea of the staying power behind wisdom, that seems to be consistent through this section as well. As we mentioned from time to time about the book of Proverbs, these are not absolutes. When it talks about the fear of the Lord prolonging days, there are godly people who fear the Lord who die young, and there are wicked people who live long lives. But here the general statement is true that if you follow the ways of the Lord, you're going to avoid a lot of the things that would take life early, but not just that physical safety, but just the prolonged and the anyway. Sometimes your thoughts they just vanish right from your mind. So I'm gonna be quiet and let somebody else speak.
thought you did a good job there. It does seem to be, as you're wrapping up that chapter, that here's some general things that you're generally going to be blessed versus you're generally not. If you follow after wisdom versus not following after wisdom. So I will say it was Brad that sent me the suggestion on trying to maybe looking at comparisons and thematic things, and like, hey, are there subjects that continue to shine forth? So I appreciate that approach. Maybe we'll do that again when we come back. Maybe we'll even be able to do all chapter 31 verses. We can do the reading of it and then come back and discuss it. As we are dealing with things here today, I'll just kind of just bullet point. So I think we looked at the first section. We see, all right, there seems to be contrasts, comparing and contrasts. Boom, boom. This versus that. This versus that. And Brad had pointed out, I think there that with those contrasts, you kind of have some black and white looking at things. There's no like middle ground in this, and that helps us as we seek to sharpen our senses spiritually. And we talked about verses 18 through 22. Some things that will come outwardly with our mouths, but that's kind of all tied together with where our heart's at, and where our heart's at is going to be led by what direction we're seeking information. What are we feeding our minds and our hearts with? We're certainly going to be rich if we're storing up wisdom. And others had pointed out verses 23 through 26. Where our interests ought to be versus having just some foolish way of looking at life and being flippant and doing foolish things, and finding sport in evil. And then to wrap it all up, verses 27, 30 through 32, you guys seem to collectively have pointed out that there's the extolling of wisdom, and just kind of wrapping it up, that you're generally going to be blessed by seeking after and storing up and extolling wisdom versus foolishness and wickedness. There's going to be an end result for whichever path we choose to take. So I'll borrow from Chris and his admonition for us to be diligent in these things. Appreciate everybody and your contributions today. And the Lord willing, we'll come back next Wednesday, do it again, deal with chapter 11.
We'll see y'all.
Thank you. Good to see everybody.